Hello everybody, I am Bhavesh from marketing team at Zycus. I welcome you all to today's webinar CPO Game Changer Series Volume 3, People, Process and Communication, and we appreciate the time that you all have taken out to come to this event today. I would like to briefly introduce today's panel before we start with the webinar. We have Andrew Bartoloni over here. Andrew is the Chief Research Officer at Ardent Partners. Andrew is a recognized expert in sourcing, procurement, account payables, and supply management. Andrew has been named a Pro to Know by Supply and Demand Chain Executive 3 times. Andrew has been an industry veteran for over 15 years and has benchmarked thousands of enterprises across all facets of the supply management operations. Andrew has held leadership roles in sales and marketing and services at Ariba and Commerce One. He has the experience in strategic sourcing, business process transformation, and software implementation. Background also includes consulting and investment banking. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Bhavesh. Thanks for having me today.
Okay. Also, we have Gabriel Quebec. Gabriel is the Vice President for Global Procurement and Materials Management at Praxair. Gabriel is responsible for creating strategic supplier relationships worldwide in order to continuously improve the quality of equipment and services delivered to Praxair while reducing total costs. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de Mexico and a master's degree in international business administration from Georgetown University. Quebec joined Praxair, a Fortune 250 company, in 2006 as a finance director. He also served as Finance and Procurement Director, Vice President Finance and Procurement, and most recently, Finance Director for Asia. Hello, Gabriel.
Hello, Bhavesh. Thank you for having me, and happy to be here.
I would now like Andrew to continue with this webinar today.
Great, thank you, Bhavesh, and hello, everybody. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the third research report, and today's a presentation that mirrors that report. Third in a series that focuses on the game-changing strategies that Chief Procurement Officers have identified for their organizations to take their current performance to the next level. We're going to drill down into that. Gabriel and I are going to have an interactive back and forth discussion as we go. And so let me just show you the general agenda, right? So I'm going to do a little bit more of an introduction myself and a little bit of the research. Then we're going to drill down into one of our latest market research studies that focused on strategic sourcing and really will go to allow people to see what's happening in the marketplace today, and really then we'll tee up, I think, the heart of the discussion, which is the focus on the CPO game-changing strategies that we've organized as people, process, and communication. Then we'll summarize it, and then we'll be hanging around for a Q&A session, so to the degree that you have questions, feel free to type those into the Q&A part of your console as you go, and we will make sure to answer those at the end, and if time's does not allow, we'll work to make sure that you get those answered. So little quick introduction, right? So Bhavesh did give an introduction to me, right? But I'm the Chief Research Officer at Ardent Partners. We are a research and advisory firm focused solely on supply management. We look at the processes, the strategies, the technologies that drive operational excellence across the procurement and finance arms of an enterprise. I've worked in the industry for 17 years now. One of the ways in which we produce our research, so certainly we do webinars, and I think I mentioned that this presentation today is really linked to a report that Zycus will make available to you in the short term. But for those of you that find today's discussion of interest, we invite you to visit our website, CPO Rising, which really focuses on sharing our latest research, sharing news of what's happening in the industry, and then analyzing trends and best practices, and ultimately focusing in on topics that matter to CPOs and those that aspire to the role. Now, speaking of Chief Procurement Officers. We are also hosting an event at the end of this quarter, March 29th and 30th in Boston. At this point, a select group of CPOs and other procurement leaders are going to come together in Boston for our inaugural event, CPO Rising 2016. Now, this is an executive symposium brought to you by my firm, Ardent Partners. Attendees can expect to return home with a collection of new and innovative ideas to help improve the performance of their organizations and increase the procurement team's overall impact. So from keynote presentations by leading procurement executives to panel discussions and breakout sessions, we've put together a great speaker panel that's going to highlight procurement-led innovation within the enterprise and across the greater supply chain, and really focusing on the larger theme of procurement agility in the age of innovation. If you are a CPO or a procurement executive listening to this before March 29th, invite you to go check out our site there for more details, and hope to see you in Boston. So let's on to the research, right? So the state of strategic sourcing in 2016. The research that I'm presenting here today is based upon a survey and a report that was published in Q4 of last year. As you can see, we had more than 300 respondents, from a largely executive position within procurement primarily. The research does favor large enterprises, which we would consider companies or enterprises with revenues greater than $1 billion annually. The research does tilt towards North America with an EMEA flavor as well. Very horizontal in nature. It's drawn from 28 distinct industries. And as part of each of the market research studies that my firm conducts, we conduct detailed interviews and Q&A sessions with executives who have taken the survey and who are participating in the research, so that we can add a little bit more color and context to the data. Now, just going to start to talk about what's happening in 2016 and what are CPOs really responding to as they go about developing their plans, and now really at this point should be really thinking more about executing their plans for 2016. And as we go, I think we're going to have Gabriel offer his thoughts and commentary as well on what he sees here and the direction that he's taking his organization. But what I would highlight for you here is that in 2016, much as it has been for the past decade that I've been conducting market research in this area, and have conducted a study very similar to this now for, I guess, 11 years running, savings is still top of mind. It's a top business pressure, right? In good times and in bad, procurement's charge is to find more savings. Now, what I would say is more interesting about this number versus this number that we would have seen 5 or 6 years ago is that the intensity of the pressure to find more savings is reduced quite dramatically. If you were to go back to the aftermath of the global recession, 2009, 2010, even into 2011 timeframe, we would see 80 to 90% of CPOs really focused on finding more savings. But what we've seen over time is that there's been a gradual reduction in that pressure. So really only about half of the procurement organizations in the market today have prioritized finding more savings as really a top priority or top business pressure for the year. And what we've seen is I guess we'll have to see as we go through this business cycle if that pressure is linked to the business cycle, or if part of our hope, at least anyway, is that CPOs over the past couple of years and certainly over the past decade have begun to better communicate the broader value proposition that a procurement function can bring to bear on behalf of the enterprise, right? Certainly savings is a component of that, but in different market climates, in different sourcing situations, and in working with different parts of the organization and their goals and objectives, finding savings is not always the at the top of the list of what's trying to be achieved when procurement's engaged on a sourcing project, or really helping to guide and influence budget holders and business stakeholders to make smart decisions. Gabriel, I'm not sure. I mean, do you see anything here to sort of strikes a chord with you?
Yeah, Andrew, I think that this all at the end translates into how does procurement really become more of a partner to the organization. And this traditional approach to looking at procurement as a back office part of the organization needs to continue to die little by little. And the only way to be able to make that possible is really to be hand in hand with the rest of the business and sitting at the table whenever the discussions are taking place on what's going to happen in the future and what can we do to improve the process, the business, and the overall state of things in the company going forward.
No, I think that's a great insight, right? I mean, I do think that one of the challenges that we see, right, so certainly, and we're not going to spend too much time talking about best in class today, but, you know, we do see a segment of the procurement market, a segment of procurement departments and CPOs globally that have accomplished this transformation, that do have that great level of engagement, that have really, you know, chipped away at sort of the legacy view of procurement in the back office, as you note, and what they really do is serve as a model for those that are still working on these transformations, and these are transformations that we see that take a number of years, or you know, that do not just sort of emerge overnight. But you know, I think what the best in class have shown is that that this is something that can be accomplished by procurement organizations, and we continue to be very optimistic that more and more of these will continue to push the envelope forward. That's not to say that organizations don't have challenges, and this is in the sourcing context, right? So when you're looking at the sourcing part of an overall procurement operation, you know, the challenges here are somewhat in parallel to the game changers that we'll be talking about in a little bit. There's challenges around process and systems, right? Organizations still have a hard time mapping their processes to systems, and really where I see this problem is not in the actual mapping of the process to the system, but it's in getting the right process into the system. I think that there tends to be, when you put, you know, this part of a software deployment program in the hands of the process owners, you know, these are the process junkies, there tends to be the risk of process overkill and not really focusing in on streamlining the processes and really working to ensure that the activity that happens in the solution is what's needed, you know, is really a requirement and not just something that you're doing more from an administrative standpoint. You know, I think that when you talk to any number of CPOs, and sort of moving left to right on the screen here, when you talk to any number of CPOs over the past decade, and you know, I've talked to hundreds of them, frankly, in our research and in our work, you know, the challenge of the staff and the view of it as a constraint in really driving procurement forward, you know, has always been at the top of the list. And the challenge or the constraint here falls into two areas, and it's one that, you know, will make us understand why it's a game-changing strategy. But you know, from a sheer headcount standpoint, you know, CPOs feel that they're generally understaffed. They feel this because they're also being pressed to take on more responsibilities, and you know, they're not getting the headcount that sort of grows with those responsibilities. But one of the other challenges, and again, we'll talk about a little bit more about this in a minute, is getting the right talent, right? Finding the right talent, hiring it, training it, retraining it, and then retaining it becomes a challenge in a job environment that's very different from a generation ago, where you know, graduates out of college may find that one employer and ride with them for the entirety of their career. You know, the average employment tenures today are shrinking and continue to shrink, and so, you know, the challenges that are faced are very real and do require you know, newer considerations, at least in the approach of how to manage these.
And to that point, Andrew, I would say that's a reality in our business. It's not going to change. So hoping to convince anybody that we need more resources, and the rest of the organization is willing to give us more resources is just unrealistic. So there's this concept of sooner is better than better, and I would challenge all of you to make sure that that is not the case. It's much better always to wait to get the best type of talent into your organization. For us, sometimes we have to double and triple the efforts to make sure that we continue to move the ball forward on the day-to-day activities that we need to make sure we accomplish for the business. But sacrificing speed for convenience instead of really getting the right level of person and the right staff for that position, you will pay for that tenfold in many years to come. So quality over speed is always the right answer for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I mean, and I know we haven't really covered some of the ground here. I'm just trying to keep it more conversational. But, I mean, do you have a general sense of, right, so say you're looking for an experienced manager or director level person. What type of, what type of lead time are you typically seeing in the marketplace? Is this something that you're able to hire? Obviously, no situation is going to be the same, but is this something that's taking you a couple of weeks? Is this taking you a couple of months or longer in general, or do you have a feel for that?
We just went through a process where we replaced a director that just retired from us, and we knew about it with a long time of anticipation, and it still took us almost 4 months to replace that position because, again, it's not that we don't have good people, and it's not that we don't think that somebody could do the job. Is the fact of asking ourselves, do we have absolutely the best person to do this? Because you're not going to get more. This is what you're going to get, and it better be the right person to cover that position for the next 3-5 years to come. And if you miss that one, you're not getting it back, and you're paying it for many months to come.
Right. And again, it really does speak to the, I mean, the pressure is really on to find that right talent because the headcounts aren't just, easy to come by, right? Even the top performing CPOs and procurement organizations that are delivering great returns based upon the investment in the organization, based upon the budget, still have a difficulty finding, that next group of job requisitions. And so it does mean that you need to be more deliberate in who you bring on board, but also the time frame that Gabriel discusses, brings up an interesting point as it relates to knowledge management. It's one of the reasons why I've always been, I think, a very strong proponent of the use of technologies like eSourcing to help organizations scale their processes, to help organizations get better results as well. But one of the often overlooked aspects of a tool like eSourcing is that it can capture all of the information and communications of a sourcing project. So when that director retires or when that person that you have on your staff takes a job or moves out of town, leaves your organization, the entirety of the work done on that project by that resource to date doesn't disappear out into the ether with that person, right? That there is a system that captures that information. And so something to think about when you're looking at, how to leverage and how to better capture and retain your knowledge in the context of a shifting job market, certainly in the U.S. and one that we see shifting now in Northern Europe to boot. So we turn to sourcing capabilities, right? And so what we see here are, I think a standard list of things that most sourcing professionals, and so from my own background, right, as part of my time as a strategic sourcing consultant, I've managed sourcing projects for more than $500 million worth of goods and services. So I do have some direct context besides just reading, conducting the research and interviewing folks. What we see on this list are things that I would say most sourcing professionals would say, oh, these should obviously be on the list of, check the box, these are things that our team should be able to do. And what we see is that while a majority of sourcing teams do have these things or can do these things, the reality is that between a third and 40% and with the bottom two, a close majority of sourcing teams cannot do these things. And I really, I think it speaks to many things. It speaks to the challenges that many organizations still have in doing the basic execution of their sourcing activities. I think it speaks to the challenge that enterprises have more broadly in, enabling a procurement transformation. And then I think, it speaks to some of the challenges around, people, process, and technology. But I'm not sure, Gabriel, if any, what you think of this list, or have any thoughts.
I would divide this list into two, and so the first 4 bullets are more related to what are the capabilities, the process, the use of technologies and tools that you have to be able to be more effective on the day-to-day part of the process that you have to be responsible for. There are 2 bullets there that are much more related in terms of how well are you really collaborating, and are you engaged not only with your internal customers but with your suppliers. And I believe that that's an area where we have not have a very strong focus on from a procurement perspective in terms of really taking advantage of, number one, the capabilities that our suppliers can bring to the table, and really where you can partner with them and looking for new solutions, new alternatives, new ways to improve the ways that you do your business. And just think about how many times have you gotten your R&D teams together from a supply base and from your company together to work on a project. You're both spending a significant amount of money, and maybe you're spending a significant amount of money on the same type of things, but you're just either duplicating efforts or you're working on things that might not be the right things to be working on from that end when you look at your suppliers and what they're doing. So I think there's lost opportunities there, and there are things that we certainly have to look at much more seriously going forward to take advantage of this and to avoid just this mistake of thinking that we can do it all, and with the resources that we have, we certainly will not be able to do that.
Right. I mean, I think one of the major themes that we've seen in our research over the past couple of years, and one of the major themes that we were highlighting at our upcoming event in March is our themes around collaboration, both internally and externally, and really why collaboration is so important is because resources are constrained, and business goals and objectives are changing at a faster pace, and organizations need to be more agile, and in that environment, functional silos just simply can't exist. And as you start to look at your strategic suppliers, the value that they can bring to your organizations and the direct impact that they can have on your financial performance, on your products and services, and the delivery of those, is only going to increase. So I think you highlighted and make a great point there. Again, somewhat along the lines of glass half full, glass half empty, or magnifying glass half full, magnifying glass half empty. What we see here are the levels of the percentage of procurement departments that have enterprise level visibility into each of these areas, and I would just suffice it to say that we believe that visibility into spend and visibility into process really are the bedrocks of a procurement department. I think it's very difficult for a CPO to make the case that they are managing a strategic business function within the enterprise if they don't have visibility into their spend, if they don't have a sense of what percentage of spend that they're managing today, if they don't have a view into one of the key performance metrics. Right? We don't think savings in and of itself should define procurement performance in any period of time, but it is a component of that. And then certainly when you start to look at supplier performance, just talking about the increasing reliance that companies, enterprises are going to have on their supply chains. If you have many blind spots in understanding how your suppliers are doing, should you even be working with, your incumbent suppliers, and should you be, sourcing these contracts on a faster cycle time? You don't have visibility into performance, much less into risk. You're not able to make the best decisions. Now, I think we'll move from here, right? So quick look at technology. Going to talk about some metrics, and then we'll dive into really the meat of the CPO game-changing strategies. And what we see here from a technology adoption standpoint is, again, sort of lukewarm data here that says that, these are the primary applications. We're showing you more than 4 lines here, but the primary pillars of a strategic sourcing operation are really built on spend analysis, sourcing, contracts, and supplier management applications. A fully automated strategic sourcing process, by these numbers, still remains the exception and not the rule, although we are starting to see an increased desire for a cohesive suite of solutions that cut across the entirety of the strategic sourcing operations. But what we see here is that there's lots of opportunity for organizations to continue to invest in technology and scale their operations and retain knowledge and ultimately deliver better results in a faster time. Right now, that's not to say that deploy these solutions and overnight magic occurs and you've transformed to an entirely different organization. These things take time. These things take focus. These things take effort. But for many of the things we've already talked about, right, from the amount of time it takes you to hire that next director to the challenges that organizations have in placing that next dollar of spend under their management, technology continues to be a leading strategy for procurement organizations. And certainly when we look at best-in-class organizations, their adoption of, and then their use of the technology is pretty discernible. Is much more of a defining characteristic. I'm going to share with you just a few procurement benchmarks, and not necessarily spend too much time on them, but really more for your edification and for you to do sort of a back of the envelope check as to how you're performing relative to the average procurement department in the marketplace. What we see here are that, for procurement organizations, the average procurement organization today manages just slightly more than 60% of their spend. This means that when you look at all of the third-party spend, it's the direct, the indirect, the services spend. In some cases, organizations may have capital expenditures as well. What's the percentage that procurement is influencing and managing? That number is 61%. From a savings target standpoint, this is the target for 2016, 6.6%. Again, this number, is not necessarily completely relatable because there's a little bit of a dependence on the industry you're in, the region you're in, what your supplier, who your suppliers are. But what I would say is that the numbers and the pressure to find savings is down. The actual targets are down too. This is at a near-decade low. One of the reasons why we think that target is at a near-decade low is the amount of sourcing that's been conducted over the past 5 or 6 years. What we see here is that almost 50% of addressable spend that was available in the past year was sourced by an organization, right? So almost 48% of that addressable spend. And so the addressable spend, and what we mean by that, is the spend that is come due on contract, that either needs to be renewed, or that a new contract has to be set, or that it's a new opportunity in its entirety. And procurement organizations are competitively bidding that out at a 48% clip. Last metric here, and we really do look at these as four very central metrics to help understand how your procurement department is performing. This number here, the percentage of spend that is contracts compliant, is very, very low at the 55% level. So let's look at a few supplier performance, some supplier benchmarks as well, and then we'll just begin to drill down. Gabriel and I can start talking to you about some of the CPO game-changing strategies. Suppliers who comprise 80% of spend, right? So following the Pareto rule, what we see here is that most organizations are sticking to that maxim, right? So almost 22% of suppliers are comprising 80% of spend. When we look at enabled suppliers, and this is a metric that I'd like to highlight for procurement organizations and to get this metric onto their radar screens as we start to move forward. This is the percentage of suppliers that are able to receive and conduct transactions, purchase orders, invoices, and those communications online in an electronic or digital fashion. The number and a focus on this number, we believe, is important because of all of the things that we've talked about before. But for organizations to become much more streamlined and efficient in their supplier management and in removing a lot of the friction that exists today between trading partners, particularly strategic trading partners, and and if there's not a focus on this number will likely stay stagnant year over year. And the initial push to get that 15% of suppliers onboarded, we believe needs to be reinvigorated in 2016. Now, final metric here, and again, here's one without true context for your purposes, if those of you listening in, because we think that this is a very industry-specific number. But the average sourcing team today says that 6.5% of their suppliers have been rated as high risk by their organizations. Now, risk in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's the being unaware that risks exist and unclear on the risks that you're actually taking when you look at sort of the risk-reward trade-offs. And so, with that, I'm going to pivot here more directly into the CPO game changers, people, process, and communication. And I think it's, the reality is that the proper blend of talented people, efficient processes, and enabling technology is needed for procurement to deliver full enterprise value. Achieving the desired mix can be an iterative process, but is one that has to be pursued, right? But it is apparently a challenge, as we've just seen, to find that mix, as many CPOs and other procurement executives struggle today to develop strong capabilities in each of those key areas within their departments or operations. For example, many procurement departments lack the required skills to properly engage the broader enterprise in an attempt to place more spend under management, or to deploy and optimize the use of the latest and greatest supply management technologies. Many procurement organizations are also fairly immature, operating without well-defined processes that can help ensure consistent and precise operations. In such cases, many procurement organizations, they fail before they begin. CPOs and procurement leaders, we believe, need to take a holistic approach and consider these softer strategies for enhancing enterprise and procurement performance. And so I've mentioned previously that this is one of a series, but what the series is based on is a survey where, more than 300 CPOs were asked the question, what do you need to change to get your procurement department to get their performance to the next level, right? What are these transformational, game-changing strategies that are going to drive a dramatic shift in the way that your department performs? And we see the top ones here, and what we saw in Volume 1 is that our research has shown, and has clearly been identified here by 2/3 of CPOs, that getting the sourcing team involved earlier on a project can drive more savings, it can improve quality, and it can reduce risk. I think those of you that have worked on sourcing projects, clearly see the difference between serving as an order taker or as a strategic partner, and that difference is not subtle, right? It's great, it's dramatic, and that the potential difference in results from those two different roles makes it incumbent upon CPOs to ensure that their teams are properly engaged and executing on the right projects, right? So it's not just getting engaged, but it's making sure they're working on the right things. Volume 1 of this research series, again, report, and there is an archived recording of a webinar of this larger series on game-changing strategies for CPOs is available from Zycus. So follow up with them if you can't find it on their website. But Volume 1 discusses the strategies and approaches that CPOs and their teams can use to engage the budget holders in proactive planning discussions and formalize their levels of interaction and support. Now, Volume 2. Right, you're starting to see we're working down the list here. In 2015 and now in 2016, a procurement department's ability to use technology to help it scale resources, gain greater visibility, make smarter decisions, among many other things, should be a critical competency in our view. As we've said, and what we see right here is that more than a majority of CPOs, a slight majority, 53% of CPOs believe that, deployment of new and/or improved technology as a critical driver is something that can get their procurement team's performance to the next level. Volume 2 in the series, and there's an archived recording of a webinar and a report to match in this series, also available from Zycus, examines the value of process automation tools across the source-to-settle process, looking at it from upstream and strategic sourcing to downstream procure-to-pay activities. And so that brings us to Volume 3. Right, and really where we can pull Gabriel back into the discussion, right? I mean, what we see here is that in 2016, procurement departments around the world are increasingly reliant on diversified staff to engage with key and internal stakeholders, to clearly communicate business requirements, and effectively execute upon project timelines to drive procurement performance beyond the status quo. What we're talking about in this section is, and in an accompanying report, really focuses in on the best practices and strategies that leading CPOs have utilized to harness the power of their people, to harness the power of their processes, and to harness the power of their better communications across their operations. And so let's look at each of these three areas. And also, let's have Gabriel weigh in on his thoughts on these three opportunities, right? So you could look at these as challenges today, or really opportunities that once you figure these out, a majority or near majority of CPOs believe are really going to drive their organizations forward, right? As the CPO's influence expands across the enterprise, breaking down traditional silos erected by departments like AP or HR, legal, operations, the product teams, as these are broken down, so too, what grows are the responsibilities and workload of the procurement organization. Unfortunately, as the CPO's remit has changed and grown, department staff levels at many procurement organizations have not kept pace. Right? So it's not surprising to find that many procurement organizations find themselves in the difficult and frequently untenable position of managing increasing workloads with insufficient headcount and insufficient talent. Right? Here we are, larger and more talented staff identified by 53% of CPOs as a top game-changing strategy, right? Can you change this? Can you get this? Can you make this happen? And compounding the issue, I believe, is the changing nature of work and the changing faces of the workforce, right? We just heard about a director who retired, right? When that person was hired by Gabriel's organization, I'm certain that the job description looked very different than the one that was used to replace him. How do you start to take into consideration the changes in the organization, the changes in the business landscape, the change in direction that's likely to occur within a majority of the companies that people are listening in on today. I mean, Gabriel, as you look at the challenge here, and sort of maybe you're echoing comments from earlier. I mean, thoughts here on the importance here of not only finding, keeping the staff at full capacity or full size, but making sure that they've got the right skills.
Well, yeah, I think that one of the main issues here, and we talked a lot about talent, and I think that the picture there is a perfect way of describing this, because you have to have a seat at the table. You have to look at that possibility to having one of your team members to have that seat at the table, because that's where you can really start bringing the value. But you also want that person that has that seat at the table to be capable, because he will reflect on the rest of your organization. And if he's just using space, or if he's not bringing value, then life for you in the future is going to be miserable, because nobody's going to want to give you more resources. Nobody's going to want to invite you again to be at that table. And for you to get the level of engagement, the level of participation, and just the trust of the organization to add to whatever needs to happen in the organization is going to be impossible. So that's why it's so important to have the number one, much more than number of people, the right quality and qualification of people sitting at that table. And then number two is the responsibilities will expand. That there's no question about that. But if you don't have the right person that can handle that, then they're only going to take them away as soon as they come. So you really need to be aware of what's coming your way and supporting whoever is in that position so they can walk the talk. Being at the table and having the information is just one part of this process. Really executing on what needs to be done is the most important part of that discussion, right?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about execution in a second, but right, so everybody knows this saying, right? Nothing succeeds like success, but the flip side of that coin is that nothing fails like failure, right? And so if you put the wrong people into that first meeting room to talk about how your organization is going to drive a lot of value on these number of projects, and that person is not equipped to communicate it, much less equipped to execute on those projects, you're going to erode confidence in your organization, and that just if you go to sort of it's much easier to retain a customer than it is to find a new one. You really can't afford to, take those wrong steps. And it is one of the reasons why you see some procurement organizations taking it a little bit more slowly, being less aggressive in taking on those new responsibilities, because they simply don't have the people to put out there. We talked a little bit about the shift in the market, and I think one of the considerations that we make in the report, which was co-authored by one of our research analysts, Matthew York, and he is a millennial. I think the point to be made is not just that the way that procurement goes to market within the enterprise is different, but that the supply markets are changing much faster. Technology has become much more important in the way that all people do all of the things in their lives, whether it's communication or gaining information and learning and understanding what's happening around them, and how they engage with the larger environment. They're whether that's at home, at work, or at play, I guess. And so, considerations, should be made, and, don't just, much in the same way we think that if your supply base today in 2016 looks exactly like it did in 2006, that's a huge red flag. I would say the same thing for your procurement department staffs. Things are changing much too fast for you to go out and try to hire the classic sourcing person whose primary skill was to quote unquote beat up a supplier in a conference room and get the best price. Right? I think that that matches with a different mentality that most CPOs are bringing to fore within their organizations, and really does need to be a consideration moving forward. So people. Talk about process, right? I think Gabriel nailed it when he said, you can have the right people, but if they can't execute, what's going on here? And so it's not surprising that a top game-changing strategy noted by 44% of all CPOs is to improve their team's execution across their operations, right? From upstream to strategic sourcing to P2P. What does it mean to execute well? From our standpoint, it means understanding the process workflow, managing it well, including constituents and staff, and following up with them to ensure that loops are closed and that results are delivered. Put simply, it means being able to execute as planned, precisely and efficiently, with process rigor, but without process overkill, right? I think that, again, maybe, Gabriel, we'll pull you back in here. I mean, do you want to sort of expand on the point, right? When you look at execution and its, importance to overall results and to continued engagement and, positive view within the enterprise, maybe talk about your approach there, or maybe even talk about some of the things that you're doing to ensure that you do execute well.
Well, I think you nailed it when you said that it's changing the way that we incorporate, hire, and have people become part of the organization. We don't only are looking at very good negotiators, sourcing managers, people that only understand data and know what to do with data. Now people have to understand the business side of the process. What makes the business tick? What is it that makes the business really add value, and not only on reducing costs by pounding a supplier, but really understanding what part of the process you're affecting and how you're going to affect it in a positive way when you do what you say you're going to do, and how you're going to affect it in a very negative way when you don't walk the talk. And I think this is basically what this couple of slides that Andrew has here talk about, and it's the change of the mentality and the change of how we are looking at the people that have to join and have to be a part of the procurement organization today.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think, when we look at, who are the groups that do well, right? Procurement departments succeed in the consistent execution of their activities, the ones that take a holistic approach to their processes by seeking to standardize, streamline, and where pragmatic and where possible, automating them, right? So, are your processes defined? Are they scalable and repeatable? Are they focused on what's important? Is there rigor? But is that rigor commensurate to the opportunity, right? You may have a 5-step sourcing process for $100,000 spot buy or sourcing project. You may have 5 steps for your large international, multifunctional, multi-million-dollar sourcing project that takes months, not days. You may still want to do those, those same 5 steps, but the level of information and what you're doing within each of those areas, 5, 7, whatever your process is, it should match the opportunity. And then I think the other thing that's important for organizations, and that gets lost in the mix when you're looking at the amount of times that people are doing projects, and this is particularly true when you look at process automation, right? When you move a process from offline to online, it is a change, and it's viewed as a change by the majority of your organization. If they're doing if you have a category manager that runs 3 sourcing projects a year, and they get training 6 months, they get training today, and their first sourcing project is something they're going to start in July. They need the refresher. They need to have access. They need to get comfortable on that. So what are the procurement leaders in your organizations doing to ensure that not only do you have the right processes, not only do you have the right people, right? Game-changing strategy number 1. Do you have the right processes? But do you have, are they matched, right? Are they getting trained? Do they know what to do? Do they know how to execute? And then finally, do they know how to communicate, right? Let's do a quick quiz, right? So, procurement's value proposition, 2016 goals and objectives, how they link to enterprise-wide goals and objectives. What are procurement's KPIs, right? As you look at your organization, how familiar is your CEO, your CFO, the other executives with these values and items? How familiar are business leaders and budget holders, right? The people who you need to engage with, right? Game-changing strategy number one is getting engaged sooner in sourcing projects. How familiar are those people with what it is that you do, what it is that you're focused on, and how you can help them? How about your team? How about your staff, right? Are they, how well can they, how well do they understand each of these items? And just as important, right, how well can they present them to the larger organization, right? And improving the procurement department's communication plan, it's a very broad strategy. It can have many moving parts. It's why 48% of all CPOs and procurement leaders regard it too as a top game-changing strategy, right? At the CPO level, better communication means more clearly illustrating to the CEO and CFO the value that procurement delivers to the enterprise in the form of metrics, in the form of enhanced compliance, reduced risk, any other number of factors that contribute to overall increased value. It also includes communicating to the budget holders and communicating to the staff, but it's incumbent upon the staff to take that mantle forward and out into the organization. Gabriel, I mean, maybe comment here on the final game-changing strategy.
Well, I think that the two best and more important things here, and that you mentioned, and I believe that we do need to do a lot more in that sense, is how well are we communicating what we can bring to the table? How well are we communicating? Why is it important that we bring that to the table? Because at the end of the day, in most cases, the procurement function is an afterthought for the wrong or right reasons for the rest of the organization. The last thing that they're thinking of whenever they are engaging with a customer, with anybody in the field, is what would the procurement organization think about this? And when you become the afterthought and you don't know how you can really bring that value to the discussions, then you're placing yourself in being, again, back office part of the business, and a lot of opportunities will be missed by that.
Right. I mean, everybody knows what sales does within an organization, right? And they're very good at pounding their chests, right? Not everybody knows what again, for better or for worse, what the procurement function is doing, and how can they support and not just simply wrest control away from budget holders and people who have their budgets and who like control over their decisions. But some standard tips for communication, and these are standard. These are there's nothing really here that's very specific to procurement, right? But what's the message? How clear is it understood, right? Do you have a 5-minute overview? Do you have an elevator pitch? What are the things that you can do that really just boil down to its critical elements in understandable and bite-sized morsels what it is that procurement's doing? Now, you need to be able to do that. You also need to have a plan, right? So often the plans are, we're going to, save this much money, and it just sort of falls there, and then, sourcing teams and procurement teams, find themselves, oh, it's August, we need to find something fast to source. Build in the plan, build in the relationships, and think about how you as a professional organization, what are the best practices that you can bring to the organization across all of the elements, right? People, process, technology, communication. And so that was a quick summary, and then we'll have time for a question or two, I believe. Right at the end of the day, there are multiple game-changing strategies for CPOs seeking to elevate their team's performance to the next level. Individual experience and a healthy dose of trial and error are going to dictate what strategies a CPO should implement. People, process, and communication are all areas to consider when debating where to begin, right? And one thing to consider, I guess I would say, is that change does not occur in a vacuum. This means that CPOs and other procurement leaders seeking to enhance their team's performance should consider adopting, multiple game-changing strategies in parallel, particularly when those strategies are complementary to one another and whose sum may be greater than the whole of their parts. Right? After all, it can be difficult to change the people element of a procurement department without also affecting process as well as communication changes. But whatever strategy or strategies a CPO decides to adopt, they should know that their job is not done after implementation, right? Continuous improvement is a virtue, and it really does stand as the sort of standard operating process of a best-in-class or world-class organization. So quick summary, right? CPOs in 2016. Focus still is to cut costs, increase savings. It's a top pressure, but there's other things that need to be focused on. It is from a process standpoint, it's getting the processes mapped to the systems in a way that makes sense. It's getting the right head count, but as Gabriel really has pounded his hand on the table, it's making sure that those people have the right skill sets. I think you can train some of it, but some of it's just sort of imbued within that person. Other challenges exist, but fortunately, as we've seen, the CPOs have several top strategies for success, right? And here's that list. We'll just sort of end it here, right? The key takeaway from our view is, this list may not map perfectly to the one that your CPOs have in place. They're probably pretty close, I would guess. But, whether they do or not, there should be this list. And then, for this to work, right, you can't just talk about it, let's talk about it some more. You need to have a plan, and you need to put it in place to begin to ensure that these things do occur, right? They're not just simply going to happen organically. You've got to force the issue, and as procurement leaders, and even as those of you that are listening in that aren't leaders in your organizations, I look at it as incumbent upon you also to really, be out there and be a driving force for your organizations in how you interact with the larger enterprise and in how you engage with those that sit above you and below you within the organization. And so, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bhavesh and see if there are some questions here for us.